Yeah, it works.
Yeah. Why don't you break out the hammer to check on it?
No, it's. I don't think it damages it.
The first thing they teach you in like audio class is don't bang on the microphone. The first thing you do every time we sit down here is it working? It's working.
It's metal, and I tap it just to make sure the thing goes where it's supposed to.
I've got a good idea. This will be enchanting for our audience members. Keep doing that.
You're an editor, right? Edit it out. My entire life is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, if you need to shoot me doing yoga if you can talk me into it.
I don't want to see that. I don't recommend.
You don't want me to see me in the happy baby pose?
No.
With my crotch in the air and I'm holding on to my feet?
Can you do that?
Yeah.
You can do that?
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can kind of do it.
And then the lady says you can rock back and forth and gently massage your back. And I'm just like,
I can't do it the way they do it, which is she has her legs out straight. My arms aren't even long enough to reach out to my feet. You know what I mean? I have to bend my feet.
Yeah, you pull them in and
Yeah.
You go inside and then outside.
Yeah, it feels good though. I heard some theaters actually keeping their theater open 24 hours so they can just churn them in. It's the machine, man. Get them in, get them out. 3 hours later.
If they did that, then they could do, midnight movies.
Yeah, well, I mean 24 hours just for Avengers.
Oh.
Just for Endgame. Because it's such a thing.
Yeah, but I don't see them doing it more than a weekend. Anyway, I didn't see that.
I mean, they didn't even do that when Star Wars came out. The Force Awakens.
Yeah, but, Marvel is bigger than Star Wars, I think, now. There's a bigger legacy of movies.
Currently, but when The Force Awakens came back, that was bigger news than Endgame.
Yeah.
Or maybe on the same level as Endgame.
Star Wars has consistently crapped on itself, and we're all less and less excited.
But not in the Skywalker saga. The Skywalker saga has been
you notice
solid.
How this last one is they put Skywalker in the name.
Skywalker Rises.
Right?
Yeah.
It's because, all the flack they got for Last Jedi. It's like, fine, here, more Skywalker, okay? Leave us alone.
Okay, everybody, quiet on the set.
Film Reverie Podcast, take 80.
And action. Hello, Film Reverie listeners. This is Michael Beckemeyer, and as always, I am joined by
the balding Ewok.
Yay. And today we have a screenwriter who's been doing this for a long time, Diane Drake, who wrote
the original What
Men Want, but it's What Women Want and Only You. Correct? Yes. At least those things. I'm sure you've done other things too. Those are the ones that the standard name dropped ones, I guess. I don't know. So I wanted to talk. So hello, welcome. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much.
I'm not even sure how we met. Did we met? We met on Twitter. We must have met on Twitter.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And I thought, it's not every day that like an actual Hollywood paid screenwriter actually follows me on Twitter. So I perked up for a second and thought, whose tweet did I get tagged in? And she accidentally followed me. But so how did you get started? How long have you been doing this? And what was the main? What's the story there?
Okay. Well, it depends how long a version you want, but I started officially writing in, I guess it was 1991, I believe. And at the time I was working in development as a VP of what they call creative affairs for the director, Sidney Pollack.
Nice.
And it was. Mostly. I'll get to that. But and prior to that, obviously to get to that point, I had other jobs in development and been a story editor, a reader, and a story editor, and an acquisitions executive, and it's a very tough business. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. So I would get fired, my boss would get fired, I'd get fired, company go out of business, whatever. And then with Sydney, which was in many ways an extraordinary experience, and he was a really brilliant man. But the guy who hired me originally, and he split, a guy named Mark Rosenberg, who's no longer with us, but he used to run Warner Brothers, and then they partnered. And anyway, and we were in this little tiny bungalow on the Universal lot. It was very, cozy. There was maybe a dozen of us. And he and Mark parted ways, and then I was afraid I wasn't going to get to stay because that had been kind of my experience. But then Sydney asked me to stay. So Sydney effectively, in a way, hired me twice. He hired me when he and Mark were partners, and he asked me to stay after he and Mark split. And then probably about a year after that, maybe slightly more, someone else was brought in to run the company. And I will be honest and say she made my life a living hell. She really did. She did not want anybody there who predated her. That's not uncommon in Hollywood. People like to clean house, but it wasn't that easy because it was Sydney's company,
Mm-hmm.
and he hired me. So she pretty much undermined anybody she wanted to get rid of. And I knew what was coming. She was very clever. She was very Machiavellian and kind of brilliantly so. But after a while, you start to figure out that somebody's undermining you. And so I really, I was terrified, he didn't pay very much money, but it was a job, and I had health insurance, and I didn't have, a trust fund or anything to fall back on. And I just felt like, well, I better take what I've learned and try, that was the one thing they couldn't take away from me was what I'd learned. And so I wrote my first script at night while I was still there in 3 months. It was a little talking animal story called Dog Meets Cat. And it got me an agent, which was a miracle. But I didn't, he was rep by CAA at that point, and I wasn't about to send it to anybody there because I didn't even want them to know. But so I just contacted smaller agencies, and again, sorry for the sirens.
It's okay.
When she warned us, she knew what was coming.
It's a busy street, I told you. I'm so aware of it when I do something like this. Like ordinarily, I just don't even hear it.
Right.
But I'm so aware of it. I live right above the California.
It's a very like LA noir thing to have sirens off in the background. You sound really cool though. So okay.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, it's a little double indemnity, right? We got that.
Yeah.
So where was I? So I got an agent, and I had 2 of the 5. I think I contacted 5, and 2 of them were interested in meeting with me, and one of them made me an offer. And it was really sweet. I was just telling somebody this the other day. I remember because the script was called Dog Meets Cat, and when I went in to meet with them, they brought in somebody's dog. So they brought in, to meet me, which I thought was really sweet. Anyway, and then shortly thereafter, I got pushed out.
Oh.
And that agent, who sadly is no longer with us, but he got me one meeting off of that script. It didn't sell, but he got me one meeting. It was at a company which I don't think even still exists, but it was Hanna-Barbera, who did the Flintstones and stuff.
Yeah.
They were moving into live action at that point, and they wanted me to write a little treatment about dogs, like using the Prince and the Pauper with dogs. It was kind of odd, but anyway, it was a job, and so I was like thrilled, and that got me in the Writers Guild, and it got me health insurance for a year, and paid $25,000, which was a huge sum to me at that point,
right.
Just to survive, and it also allowed me to call myself a writer, but which was huge, and then that bought me the time to write Only You, and then I sold Only You for a lot of money.
Had you aspired to be a writer before that, or is it something you just sort of like, well, maybe I should try this? Or
it's funny, I don't think consciously I had, but I think more than anything for sort of lack of confidence, which at a certain point I remember having this talk with myself thinking, here you are sitting in judgment, working for Sydney at that time. He was a very big director then. Of some of the best writers in Hollywood, and giving your opinion of them and how you think they can make their scripts better. And if you know so much, why aren't you using this for yourself? Yeah. Because I did look around, separate from the fact that she was making my life miserable. I would look at these writers who'd come in, and, this one was on a cruise around South America, and somebody else was, living in Paris. And it was just like, wow, that looks like a pretty good life, I mean, and I also thought, and this is a little bit relevant now, I guess, I do remember thinking that there were guys submitting scripts who knew much less than I did. And
you find that to be common.
Yeah, I just remember thinking that they didn't have the experience I had. I mean, I'd already been at this for quite a while at that point. I had read hundreds, if not thousands of scripts, and I had really, spent a lot of time learning about it. And I thought, they don't know what I know, but they're doing it and I'm not, so I need to step up if that's what I want.
I want to, well, for example, you got, how did your scripts get noticed? Or you said it got you an agent. Like, we have scripts, but we don't have, how do we...
Yeah, but we never worked with Sydney Pollack. That was probably...
That might have gotten her in the door, yes.
That was the thing. Yes, that people returned to my call, right?
Yeah.
They didn't call once I wasn't working there anymore. Trust me on that. But I did it while I was still working there. And I knew I could get them to return my call, which is not to say I could get them to sign me, right? Or, sell me, right? That was, I actually had dinner last night with a friend who's an aspiring writer, and we were talking about, like, what is really necessary. And I think it's at least three things. And one is some talent, one is perseverance, and one is luck. Yeah. And those three things really have to intersect. And where the luck came in for me was I had put in the time, and I'd like to think I had some talent. But where the luck came in was it was a really good time to be selling spec scripts. The early 90s, it was the heyday. And that was another thing that gave me confidence. I just thought, these people selling material, they don't know more than I do. But they're doing it, I mean, some of them knew more than I did, God knows, some of them have more talent. But there were other people out there who were getting away with it that I felt like, well, but they've put in the work. They've taken the chance. They've stepped up. So, so that helped. And I know it's incredibly difficult now, and agents aren't the same anymore. Back in the day, not everybody had a manager. Very few people had managers then, writers. Now it's so obligatory because the agents really aren't interested in breaking new talent. They come to them when you've already set up the deal, basically. So, I know that that's a challenge.
Well, that's what I was...
It's a different time, yeah.
So that's what I was going to ask you next was, that was in, what'd you say, 92, 3, something like that?
Yeah,
early 90s. So what's changed? That's like 20-something years. Yeah, so is it harder... Like, you are an established writer. Is it harder still to get something produced, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question about it. They're just not making as many movies anymore. This is the sad reality is, the studios are really not in the business of making pretty much anything except tentpole franchise, $300 million movies. That's what their business model is now. Now there are people who can still get movies made in the lower, Judd Apatow or whatever, right? But he's a brand unto himself. Yeah. If somebody like I did to sell a script with no one attached, just send it out in the market and get people to read it in a week, from a writer. And that's because there was a premium placed on original scripts and the studios were interested in them. We had a bidding war. Julia Roberts' agent read my script and wanted it for Julia, and that sort of changed everything. And Demi Moore's company wanted it. So, once you have those people interested, suddenly the studios are interested. But the fact that we could even get those people to read it then, it was very different. It was very different. I have to say, and, the energy and the focus and everything right now is in TV. There's no question. Yeah. But having said that, I was teaching a class for UCLA last week, and we had a manager in to speak, and she was talking about the fact that some of these streaming services are now getting into, as we all know, to basically doing theatrical format, right? Whether they release them theatrically or not. And she was mentioning that, I guess the new Disney streaming service, Disney Plus, is looking to make movies in the $18 to $40 million range, which kind of nobody is right now. Yeah. There's the $300 million ones. They want to spend $300 million to make $1 billion. That's the business the studios are in with merchandising and all that. And then there's the indies, if you can raise money out there. But that sort of middle ground has kind of been a desert for a while. So that's an interesting new wrinkle, I thought.
It's weird that 18 to 40 sounds like low budget. these
I know.
days. But I think about like one of my favorite like movies from the '80s was obviously Die Hard, and
Yeah.
it was a big action movie that had a $25 million budget.
Really? Wow. Wow.
And it's crazy because that's something that like you were just saying, like sort of like, oh, this is a streaming service, so we're going to make smaller movies from 18 to $40 million budgets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're even calling them smaller. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just
okay.
smaller budget wise, right? But that's an interesting niche for somebody to move into now because nobody's really in it,
Yeah.
And I don't think that, again, with the exception of certain established name brands who, they'll take a chance and they'll give them $40 million to make a movie.
Right.
There's
So
not a
so
lot of them.
So what do you tell writers, like your friend, like if somebody said, "Hey, you're Diane Drake. You wrote Only You. How do I get into the business? How do I start? How do I get people to know who I am? What do you tell people?"
Well, honestly, I think one of the only real routes at this point are the contests, because if you can place in one of the larger contests, whether it's nickel or I always say nickels, apparently it's nickel, but with possessive, that's the Academy contest, the one put on by the Academy Awards people.
Yeah.
And Final Draft, probably Austin Film Festival. There's probably a couple others that I'm forgetting right now. But anyway, the really reputable, kind of more well-known contests, that if you don't know anybody, if you're not already connected to somebody who can get your work in front of a potential representation, because that's really what you need, But I mean, having said that, people go other routes. I mean, people go off and make indies. People make little shorts that they throw up on YouTube. I mean, people, the democratization of the technology is a good and a bad thing because kind of everybody can do it now in a way, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that everybody can do it, there's so much clutter out there. It always boils down to that thing. I really do believe this, and sometimes I don't want to believe this when my material doesn't sell. But I believe if it's good enough, it will find a home. I do believe, because people talk, not even like gossip talk. Then it's just like, oh, I read this amazing script, and word gets around.
Yeah.
It can take time, obviously, but I do believe that. I want to believe that, and I do believe that. But that bar is very.
Well, we over here in Orlando, Florida, have benefited from the democratization of the technology because that's how we made a feature film last year, and we finished it last year. We finished it last year. We've been working on it for a while, but we shot it on digital cameras with some of our working actor friends in town, and put it together. And we really didn't spend any money on it. It was like labor of love, for the love of the game. Just let's make a movie and see what happens, sort of thing.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's so exciting. And was it fun? Did you enjoy it?
Well, you know how it is. It's supposed to be fun. No, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's also a lot of stress, a lot of and all that stuff. But I recently read the book. I wish I could remember the name of the book. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And and in that book, I don't know if you've read it or not.
I actually haven't read it, but it's been a while. I don't refresh my memory.
Well, you know how he talks in there about it's not that suffering won't happen one way or the other. It's just like deciding what choosing your own suffering.
It's like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about the shit sandwich. Which shit sandwich do you want?
Right.
Yeah.
Which shit sandwich do you want to eat? And making a movie is like stress, but it's like the goal. It's the dream, so you'll put up with whatever just to get your film made. And I've said this before, I say it to Brad all the time, not when talking about our movie because, but it's just as hard to make a good movie as it is to make a bad movie. It's just the same amount of work, same amount of hours.
Yeah, Sidney Pollack used to say, I worked as hard on the bombs as I did on the hits.
Yeah.
Do your best. And you never know. Yeah.
So, what you say? You said you do consulting also. You do like one-on-one consulting, or script consulting, or you teach classes?
I do a little bit of all of it. I do one-on-one consulting. I teach for UCLA. I serve as a mentor at some retreats. I'm going to be doing this thing called Rockaberty for the second time this July, which is very cool. It's in a castle in the French countryside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where I have like mentees and I'm a mentor, and that's really fun. And I'm going to do another one of those actually next April. It seems so far away when they first asked me, but it's a year now, in Italy, off in an island on Ischia, which I guess is off Naples.
God, I do most of my writings at like Starbucks in Oakland, Florida. These people are writing.
You can come to places for a week. So that's really cool. And I'm working on what I need to do because I have all this material and I've taught and I've written a book. I have a book called Get Your Story Straight. And so I have kind of a course on my website now, but it's just written and nobody wants to read.
Right, it's just more video. Yeah.
So I really need to do it in video, and that's one on my agenda when I get through teaching this course. I'm teaching for UCLA right now. And then make it like interactive, where there'll be like a message board and people can interact with each other. And then maybe I'll do some live stuff where I'll maybe bring in a guest speaker and people can, pitch to them or whatever. Because I just kind of did that sort of thing for UCLA, and it was really great. I had my lawyer came in, I had a manager come in, and who else? An improv public speaking person. So that's on my agenda to do that and really create a sort of community in a way online where people can interact.
Yeah, it's like in the mid 90s, I guess, when the internet became a thing, it was okay to have like stuff written online, but now everybody's got to be like catered to, I guess, everything's video.
What's so funny? I say that I'm like, really, like people, they want to be writers and they can't read and they have to have it spoon fed. And then I signed up for Ron Howard's master class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to read what Ron Howard has to say. I want him to talk to me.
Yeah, you want to watch Ron Howard. Plus, he's fun to look. That's Ron Howard. That's Opie.
It's
that's
fun.
Yeah.
That was my feeling. I always sort of felt like, well, does anybody really want to sit and listen to me talk? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, but they kind of do. They do.
They do. Well, especially if you know stuff that they don't, like, and they're serious about it. I find so many people really like us. We produce our film, and we have short films that we do and stuff like that. And not everybody, but a lot of people are like, hey, when are we going to work something together? I'm like, I am always working on something. All you got to do is show up to this and we'll put you to work, because it's just really just me and Brad trying to make all this stuff happen. And they really want to have their name on things, but they don't really want to take it seriously enough to like, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to write a good script. It's a lot of work to write, to edit a feature film, just me and Brad, hours, not even hours, hundreds of hours with no promise of any sort of return on that investment. Aside from what you learn and what you enjoy. No, I get it. And I think that is one of the prime things I run into with students and, even people I've tried to partner with, to write things with. I've tried this a number of times now. And because, you think, well, two heads are better than one. It's nice to have those story problems be somebody else's problems too and stuff. But I can tell you of the maybe 4 times I've done it, I would say one of those times I had somebody who was equally as committed as I am, and as I was. And that was before I was professional and since I've become professional, both times. It's a sacrifice. You have to want it more than almost anything else. And I'm not saying that's necessarily good or healthy. That's just reality. I don't make those rules. That's how badly people want to be in this business and want to do this. And if you don't want it that badly, then it's probably not for you. And that's fine. But, just acknowledge that. Be honest with yourself. Funny because when Brad and I are working together, I write stuff on my own, Brad writes stuff on his own, and we write stuff together. But we are different. I really admire people that it's like a marriage who can write together all the time. Because sometimes I sit down with Brad on a project and it's just that we aren't clicking on the same thing. It's like he wants one thing and I want another thing, and it's neither one of us are clicking, but on some things we'll sit down and it's like we're finishing each other's sentences.
Wow,
it is hard work to write something by yourself, but it's also completely in a completely different way to write with someone else. Because number one, I mean, you can't. That's not even like up for debate. They have to be equally in the game, you know, with on the thing. They have to be like all in, and then you also have to be like good together. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just being able, and we've discovered this. Brad makes me laugh all the time, but it's not because he's funny. It's not necessarily because he's funny all the time. It's because I laugh at him because I stay sane by, well, I'm going to choose to laugh at that instead of to take whatever he's doing seriously. But just because you make each other laugh doesn't mean you
Or making other people laugh. Yeah.
Are good together or anything like. And I pick on Brad a lot. We tease each other a lot, but so I'm mostly joking when I say he's not funny. But
I'm hilarious.
yeah, see, that wasn't funny what you just said, but I'm laughing at it because I know you think you're hilarious.
Dude, I look hilarious.
No, I understand what you're saying, and you could spend a lot of time when you're partners too, just kind of hanging out, you know, which is fine in a way. But yeah, it's a tricky thing, and I haven't mastered it. But getting back to your original point about wanting it, yeah, and that just comes with the territory, you know. You just have to be willing to kind of give it everything, and if you're not, then that's fine, and it's a hobby, and that's fine. But don't kid yourself, you know. It's very demanding, very demanding.
It's because, and if I ask you a question you don't want to answer, just let me know, and then we will either like cut that part out or not. But you've been writing for so long, and it's like they've remade What Women Want two other times at least, right?
It's been twice now, yeah.
Right. So the newest one, which we thought was funny, but
thank you. Good for you.
But
there were parts that were funny.
That's
so
generous of you. I'll just leave it at that.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. So, and again, if you don't want to go on record with it, it's cool.
Yeah.
But they probably you just got story credit because of the original screenplay, right? That you didn't go in and. This gets into very tricky territory. Right. I will say this. On the remake, no, I was not involved. So you weren't consulted. You didn't.
Paid quite well, actually, because my original deal was quite good. So my original deal called for a pretty decent payment to me on the remake. And it was funny because I actually originally heard about the remake through a friend messaged me on Facebook and like, oh, did you hear about this Taraji Henson? I'm like, really? So in the press, out of Paramount, the initial press, sometimes they called it a remake and sometimes they called it inspired by. Yeah. And I thought, I wonder if that's their way of getting around paying me. Like if one of those came from the legal department and one press release came from the marketing department, they're just trying to capitalize on the previous movie. Yeah. So my attorney and I decided that we would just keep our mouths shut until we heard that it was in production. And the minute we heard it had been greenlit and it was in production, or pre-production anyway, we would say, excuse me, you owe me money. But we actually didn't even have to do that. Paramount contacted me and said, hey, we owe you money. And I was like, excellent. Thank you.
Cool.
Now in terms of the credit, which is a very, very long and I will say painful story that I'm not going to get into here. But it's really someday. Anyway.
Was it like an arbitration thing, like a WGA arbitration thing? Okay.
Yes, that went on forever, and no, it was really it was horrible. But the thing I was going to say about the remake was apparently, and I didn't know this, you know, even though they paid me, and even though they were calling it a remake, unless you don't automatically get a share of the residuals on the remake. Because if the arbitration determines that, you know, it's kind of loosely based, but it's not really your story, like say they'd really gone in an entirely different direction, then it just says based on the film and you don't get a piece of the residuals. Uh-huh. So I had to, again, make a case about why my original script was used in the remake. And I have to say, I was a bit astonished when I pulled out that original script, and it had been a long time. I hadn't looked at it in a very long time. And I was amazed. I mean, the new movie is very, very different. I don't know that the concept works as well in reverse, but whatever, good for them. They decided it did. But so it's very different, and the dialogue's different, the characters are different, all that. But in terms of the story and the structure of the story, it tracked my original script. It tracked my original more than it tracked the script of the original movie, which they were allowed to do. You know, Paramount owns my script, and they paid me to reuse it, so they're entitled to give it to the new writers, and I could tell that they have. Because, man, the story beats were like in there, right? They've been transposed, they've been changed. But it was really kind of astonishing to me. So, yeah, that's why my name is on the remake.
So it's weird, I guess, watching, because I guess it's weird watching something that maybe if you had been consulted on, like in general, yeah. Like not just this project, but you know, like right. It's almost like reading someone else's script and knowing what you think that they should do to fix it.
Yes.
And then they didn't ask you. So
right. And I mean, okay, so here's the thing. So I think this one I can talk about a little bit more. So with Only You, I mean, this is the thing about screenwriting, right? Everybody thinks they want to be a screenwriter, and that's fine, and I understand that. I did too. But the reality of it is they take it away from you. It is not like a novel. It is not like almost any other art form. If you're a painter or a poet or I don't know what, you know, you do your thing and people respond or they don't, but nobody comes along and says, I think you should have used a little more red there, you know, and then paints red on your painting, right? So with Only You, that script, again, because of the bidding war situation and stuff, it sold for $1 million, and it sold for $1 million up front. That wasn't even if we make the movie. That was an upfront deal, which again is unheard of now. But the point is, they paid me $1 million. And then after about 6 months with Norman Jewison, they brought in someone to rewrite me. Yeah. And you know, I remember my dad saying to me, "You're the only business I know where they pay $1 million for something and then hire somebody else." You know. Yeah. But my feeling about the person they brought in, and listen, I know this is standard in Hollywood, and I know they got pressure from a particular actress to do this, because I had a great relationship with Norman Jewison, and Robert Downey was lovely too. I loved Robert Downey. Anyway, I know this is how it works, and so I was hurt, but I mean, you know, okay, that's the way it goes. But I did feel at the time, and I'm going to say this now because her name's not on it, that the writer they brought in was not a good writer. And I had read her work and I had seen her work, and I felt like what ultimately is wrong with that movie, in my humble opinion, is what's wrong with her work, which is her work is kind of cringe-inducing, and you're not quite sure, are you supposed to laugh or not?
That's what it's like working with Brad.
You choose to laugh.
Yeah, but I'm cringing on the inside.
Yeah, I'm always cringing on the inside. Just know that.
So anyway, the point is that I felt, kind of ruined a lot of my dialogue. And like I started to say, you know, if you want to bring in, like Norman Jewison did Moonstruck, right? So if you want to bring in John Patrick Shanley to rewrite me, go nuts. My hat's off. I mean, bring in somebody who's going to make me look better than I am, fantastic.
Right.
Don't bring in somebody who's going to make me look worse than I am. And I felt that's what that woman did. And then she had the nerve to originally say to me, you know, I'm not here to try to steal your credit. I'm just here to make it the best I can, blah, 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 blah. And she was a liar. Because when it came time for credit, she tried to steal my credit. But it was my idea. They were my characters. It was my structure. It was my story. And a lot of my dialogue remained intact, so she didn't get any credit.
It really is fascinating to me when you look at a franchise, like a Transformers movie, which, for the record, I've only seen like 2 of. And there's like 19 writers.
Oh, no.
You know, and it really does say, you know, you listen to other writers talk like you and other things that I've listened to and read and all that stuff. It really it's like they want your idea, they want your script, but then they don't want to act like the writer had anything to do with how good that script is, or bad, or whatever. and they just like, oh, we'll get somebody else to do it. And I get that there's creative differences, and that's bound to happen even all the time. It's bound to happen where you have creative differences because it's a collaborative art. There's like hundreds of people making one thing. It's bound to happen where people clash. I clash with the guy sitting right next to me all the time. But you're right about what you said about like musicians, painters, all that stuff. It's their song when they're done with it. They're painting when they're done with it. Yeah. They don't get some guy to go, hey, Jackson Pollock splattered all this paint all over the place. Can you go in there and like you clean it up? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You know?
Precisely. Well, and that's, this is again a matter of the economics, right? Because there's so much money at stake that there are an awful lot of movies, and I would venture to say the majority of them now coming out of the studios, and they're product. That's what they are. They're product. So they bring in one writer for one thing, one writer for something else. They're based on intellectual property, and it's not really anybody's singular vision. It's not really because, for me, with What Women Want, and I don't know if this worked, or came across, but what it meant, I meant it to be about empathy. That's what I meant it fundamentally to be about. Yeah. And how do you instill that in someone who seems to lack it, right? The remake, I would argue, is not about that or really anything except being a remake. And let's switch the sexes, right? And that's fine, and there's an audience for it, and I love Taraji Henson, and okay, whatever, I got paid. But, it's just not coming out of anybody's desire to really say something, or even however ineffectually, it's just because there's money to be made. We have this property, and let's bring in some people and let's make some product out of it, which is not to say that people don't strive to do their best, but it's just a different way of approaching it. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody last night actually about Little Miss Sunshine, and because I'd used it again in the class I'm teaching, and I just think it's really brilliant, and in a multitude of ways. And one of the things we'd done in the class is we'd really broken it down we really dissected it, like what's the opening image, what's, and it's just so perfect in every way, what's the inciting incident, what's, the first plot point, who's got the goal, all that stuff. And yet it feels completely fresh and new, and like you hadn't seen this before, and the ending is so great, and it's just so well done. And I've seen Michael Arndt. I've not seen him in person, sadly, but I've seen video of him speaking and talking about his inspiration for that, and how he really wanted to say something about American culture, and how everybody's a winner or a loser and you're on your way up or down, and how he was originally inspired to write it because he had seen Arnold Schwarzenegger speaking and saying something to the effect of, if there's anything in life he hated, it was losers. He can't stand them. And Michael Arndt was really offended by that, and this idea of calling other people losers. Yeah. And he sort of tackle that head on. But the thing I was telling my friend last night was, it's such a success story, and he wound up winning the Oscar, and he's gone on to great success, and yay, good guy gets rewarded, which is great. But he was replaced on that movie. And on that little indie, he was replaced. I don't know by whom. Obviously, I assume it's the producers who were involved. I don't think it was a studio movie. I think it was sold at Sundance. But anyway, and then whoever it was who replaced him realized that was a mistake, and he was brought back. So yeah. But on something like that, and someone that wanted, and that much of a vision, and still like, well, let's bring in somebody else. Yeah.
You don't hear about that very often, though, where a writer's like, you know what? I don't know what I can do to fix this. Like, I don't know if I can make this any better or whatever. Like when you said they realized that was a mistake.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the other person did a draft. I don't remember the name of the person. I don't know if he ever shared it. But they recognized that they were not going in a good direction, which doesn't always happen, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes that's what they wanted, and even though it's not really serving, but that's such a singular vision, that movie and that script, and the idea that you would even consider replacing somebody like that, he just seems to me to be such a smart and kind of a deep thinker, honestly. And it's like, let's just bring in somebody else. Let's get somebody else to finish up this Picasso here,
Right. And Toy Story 3, which is, I think, what he did after that, maybe not, at least not long after that, was like, I don't know. I never thought the third one would be able to be as emotional as the other two. I don't know if you like the Toy Story movies or anything like that.
I love it. I will say I love the Toy Story movies, but I will confess, as much as I love Michael Arndt, my favorite is the first one, because think the genius of Buzz honestly believing he's a space ranger and having that existential crisis is one of the most brilliant things ever.
Yeah.
And I think the Pixar movies in general, and this is just me, they've gotten a little sappy for me. They've gotten a little too button pushing in terms of emotion, and they're not as irreverent and funny as they used to be. And I think I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago, and I think it might be partly a function of the fact that they've all just gotten older, you know?
Yeah.
And
I've gotten way more sentimental the older I've gotten. So if that has anything to do with it, I'm sure that's part of it.
Well, then, yeah, it could well be. And I also think it's just easier. It's easier to do that, to be sentimental, than it is to be funny, to be genuinely.
Yeah. So what have you done since the shift in the, like you were talking about the how everything's different now than it was 25 years ago when you got your start, or however long ago that was. What have you done to adapt or shift that has worked or hasn't worked, or are you still figuring it out?
It's a good question. I continued running specs for probably way too long, and before I really realized there's just no market really for what I do at this point, which is really discouraging, to be honest. And that's kind of when I started teaching and consulting and speaking, and just thought, let me take what I know about this form, and it's really gratifying. I really sincerely enjoy teaching. I always say Hollywood has paid me well. When they paid me well. And thankfully they paid me a few times because things keep getting remade. Right.
Well, we're in the like age of the remake, so maybe you're going to get like 5 or 10 more of those off the same thing. Yeah.
I tell you, I've had 3 in the last, I don't know, only You got remade in China, and I got paid on that. What When What got remade in China, now What When What's gotten remade here. And who knows? I mean, it's crazy. But what was I going to say? So I think about TV. I actually did write a pilot recently with a partner, and it was okay. I think the response we got was okay. I don't think, and that was another case where I just felt like he's a lovely person, and I think he thinks he wants to, and I hope day he's able to do that. But I just felt like the sense of sacrifice, that he was willing to do, it just wasn't there to the degree that I felt it needed to be. Again, maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's really, you can't well, I can't do it this week or next week, but the week after, it doesn't work like that, Yeah. So, I come from that world and that beginning, middle, end, and I love movies, and I there's some television I watch, but I don't watch a lot of it. Yeah. So I feel a little out of the loop in that regard at this point. I try to stay current, but it's not my thing so much. Like, I can watch a few episodes of something that everybody raves about it, whether it's Downton Abbey or Breaking Bad or, more recent stuff, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I admire it. And I'm kind of done. It's like, that's really well done. Okay, but I don't need to tune in week after or whatever, stream the whole thing, Right. So it's a little tricky. It's interesting now with the more limited series. And like I said, I'm encouraged by the idea that maybe some of these streaming things are going to be making movies in the mid-budget range, you know? So we'll hope there, but yeah.
Breaking Bad is probably my favorite TV show ever. I don't watch a whole lot of TV either. For the same reason. I'm not dazzled by it the way a lot of people are, and I start to feel like, how much longer does this story have to happen? How much longer is this character going to be interesting to me? And it's hard to make a character interesting for 2 hours. It's really, really hard to make a character interesting for 100 episodes. You know what I mean? It's like,
absolutely. But I think we're the minority. I think a lot of people love that consistency and love seeing, season 8 of whatever, I mean, again, really, well, there you go. I mean, and they're not alone. I mean, like I said, I think we're the minority, but I don't know if my brain is just so trained, beginning, middle, end, but that's the way I sort of think. And, the only shows I can ever watch like a multitude of episodes of are comedies. Like The Office when it was brilliant, The English version of The Office is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. And I was initially horrified that they were going to do an American version. And then, I think the first season, maybe 3 seasons of that, were brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah. I'm with you on that. Yeah. You sound like me talking back to me, really. I complain. I say the same thing about The Office. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was genius. And what's funny about that? A little quick aside about that. So you ever heard of the New Yorker Festival?
I don't think so.
So the New Yorker magazine puts on this annual festival, I believe they still do, in the fall in New York, and it's very cool. They have all kinds of people from all different walks of the arts, basically. And the one year I went, a friend and I, we saw Brad Bird, we saw Trey Parker and Matt Stone speaking, and they'd have them speak all over. Like, I think they were at MoMA. And we did a walk through Chinatown, Little Italy, with Calvin Trillin, the writer for New Yorker. And then we saw Ricky Gervais in a bar. And he was speaking in the bar. We didn't just happen upon him. But and it was right before the American version of The Office was to begin. And it was so exciting to me to see him because I just thought he was such a genius, honestly. And and he was saying, and people were like, really, this isn't just a cash grab. I mean, what are you doing here? And he said, I remember him saying, I wouldn't have done it but for the fact that the guy we have to play what is effectively my character, I think is going to be fantastic. And that's basically Steve Carell, who I had never even heard of that. So trust Ricky. Yeah.
Trust Ricky Gervais. Yeah. I guess he kind of knows what he's talking about, maybe a little bit.
It sort of worked out for him. Yeah.
You know what you need?
What?
Is a What Men Want TV series. That way, that's real residuals. You know what I'm talking about? And we're in the world of the remake.
What Short Men Want. That's the series we need to write. Because it's not what everyone else wants.
What short men want are microwaves on the kitchen counter, not above.
Up in the air.
What short men want are stepladders built into the cabinets.
Yeah, see? You've already... I sold you.
That's because... No, you haven't sold me. You've beaten it into my brain for the last 2 years.
Well, it's funny because never say never, because honestly, that was a joke for a long time. People would say to me, like, well, they used to do What Men Want, and then except there's no movie there. Ha, ha, ha. Well, there you go. I mean, they did it. So you just never know. I mean, it's out of my hands. I don't own it. But if somebody wants to take a crack at that, then that would be fabulous. Yeah. Why not? Why not?
Because writers, there's no, I guess there is a 40 not a 40 hour, but like a full-time job version of being a writer, but it doesn't sound like you're that writer. You're like, write something, sell it, get it made, sort of write.
When I could. Yeah, in those days, I did. Well, it was funny because when Only You sold, I'd had that little treatment cell, and then I was praying to survive. I was just praying, just please, can I just make a living at this? Can I just do this for another year or two? I just wanted Writers Guild minimum, which at the time was like 60,000. Right. And then it sold for $1 million. And I thought, well, I guess I'm a writer now. It's like, I guess this is my job.
You hear about Shane Black selling, I think it was The Last Boy Scout for like $5 million, which was the first time a screenplay that ever...
Three, but
I could be okay, something like that.
It was huge amount, yeah.
And then, were you like the highest paid female spec scripts at that time? I mean, that sounds high.
I'm one of a handful. I think there was maybe like 3 or 4 of us in that category. There was a woman named Kathy McWhorter who wrote a script called The Cheese Stands Alone, and I think that was the first $1 million sale. And it was a charming little script. It was a little moonstrucky. It was very like Italian and stuff, but it never got made. I think she got work off of it, but I forget who else. But in terms of just flat out spec sale up front, there's not a lot of us. There's not a lot of us, period, but certainly of women. Yeah.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you about that too. It's like, now that we're in the year 2019 and everyone's finally admitting that women are smart and funny and creative and able to, when they're finally getting on the bandwagon, and has it changed for you at all? Is it like easier to get a meeting, or is it just about the same?
In all honesty, partly because I'm just not generating that work right now. But I think about it, but you know what? Here's an irony. Here's what I think about, which is probably completely out of step with where we are. One of the things I think about writing is kind of my experience in Hollywood as a woman, right? Because I've had some experiences.
Yes.
But I am not a Me Too person. I mean, I am absolutely, my hat's off to those women. I think what they endured is horrific. And I think, good on them for speaking out, and good on them for trying to get, some justice and exposing this. But for me, anecdotally, the people who have done me the dirtiest have been other women. And I think that's kind of a dirty secret that people don't like to talk about, but that's the reality. And, you know, again, a friend of mine's like, oh, you should write that now. You should write that now. Time is right. I'm like, it's really not so right. It's kind of like men bad, women good right now. And but what she said, which I thought was the point, was she goes, but in a way, it's a function of the patriarchy, which I thought, you know, you're kind of right, because I think there was that sense, conscious or unconscious, with women. And I think this probably still is, but maybe less so now, that there's one seat at that table. And, you know, consequently, the woman coming into Sydney's company and getting rid of me, and she hired only men after that, you know, that perception that, like, you know, there's only room for one and it's going to be me, and it's kill or be killed kind of thing.
Well, you touch on something that I teach high school TV production. That's my day job. And I constantly am asking girls, my students, to make something that just investigates or discovers or explains why girls are so mean to each other.
Wow.
And they don't know why, but they say, yeah, we are, but I don't know why. It's like, and your function of the patriarchy thing is a pretty good, I'm going to have to think about that a little bit, but because that's probably exactly true.
I think it's a factor, but I also think it may be more primal than that. But having said that, I want to also add, for me, I worked with some lovely women, but they did not last. They did not. It's the ruthless.
You mean they didn't survive working with you, or in general?
Well, no, they didn't survive working with them. I mean, or they didn't survive the company. You know what I mean? It just, I mean, that it's, and, you know, listen, some of my best friends are women. I mean, women can be very supportive of one another. I think they can be, but I think they also go after each other in a way that men don't. Go after each other. That, you know, for the longest time it was like, well, men are on teams. Well, women are on teams now too. You know, I mean, it's not like we don't play sports. So it's interesting that you're still running. You run into that. I mean, look at Mean Girls. You know, I mean, I don't know what that's about. But you know, I have had very supportive women in my life. But I also, like I said, the people who have done me the dirtiest time and time and time again in the business have almost always.
Interesting. I heard a quote once that really summarized the whole thing for me in a good, entertaining, and funny, but also sad way. It was, and I can't remember who said it. It sounds like something like Tina Fey might have said, but I don't think it was her. You know, when guys have a problem or they don't like somebody, they just beat the shit out of each other.
Right.
But when women have a problem with each other, they just talk bad about them behind their back until one of them develops an eating disorder. And that is so much more cruel than just beating the shit out of somebody. It's like a mind fuck.
Yeah. And well, because it's underhanded, right?
It's
exactly what I have dealt with. Now that you mention it, you know, these weren't full frontal attacks, right? Because then you can sort of defend yourself, or you could go look to somebody else and like, see what they did. No, it's much more subtle. It's much more conniving. It's really, it's stunning to me. It is stunning to me after all these years. I am still stunned by some of the things that have happened, you know, and that's in a way why I kind of want to write about them, but I have to find a way to do it that it's sort of, you know, Devil Wears Prada or something.
Oh yeah, well, start there, right? That movie is sort of, you're right, it's sort of the pinnacle. I mean, that was Mean Girls before Mean Girls, wasn't it? I think.
Sure.
Sort
was
of
it?
In a way. Yeah, kind of in a way. I think Devil Wears Prada came out before Mean Girls. I can't remember.
I can't remember.
So I apologize for this mental picture that I'm about to paint for you, but let's say you're on an elevator with Brad and you have 30 seconds to explain, and he's like, what are the 3 things I should do right now to get started? What would you say to Brad?
Oh God, you know, Steve Martin's answer to that, you know, when people, how to get into show business.
Yeah.
It's like, strive to be so good they can't ignore you.
Right.
You know, it kind of gets back to what I was saying
Brad.
earlier.
You are fucked.
I'm good at the you can't ignore me part.
Don't believe him, Brad. It's not true.
You are good at the can't ignore you part. Yeah, because you can't unsee some things.
And everybody remembers me the first time they see me.
Okay.
So that's good.
Which he promptly returns the favor by never remembering
I don't
you
know
ever.
who they are.
All right. So your website is.
Wait, well, she said once she was going to do
Oh,
another one.
yeah. Okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You were going to give us more than one, right?
Oh, I was supposed to give you more than one? I
don't-
think that's the main one, honestly. I mean, that is the one, right? Because it's it's back to what I was saying earlier, which is I really believe if it's good enough, it will get attention. It will find a home, because of the internet, because of things going viral, all of that. If you can create something that people really take notice of and are really, inspired by or excited about or whatever, it will get around. It's doing that. It's getting past that B plus. Again, in Michael Arndt, coming back to Michael Arndt, in that thing that I watched, that video I watched, he said that he was a reader before he became a writer. I guess he did development for Matthew Broderick. And he said, the phrase he used is like, the town is awash in, B- to B+ scripts. And I think that's true. It's very hard to even get to that point, right? But there's kind of a lot of those. There's not a lot of A scripts out there, right? Like I just read a script recently that I highly recommend to you guys and to your listeners and anybody who's interested, called Drudge, about the Drudge Report.
Okay.
And I would tell you the guy's name if I could remember it off the top of my head, which I can't. But anyway, he's also an actor apparently. I just thought it was genius, from the opening pages. And it's about Matt Drudge and how he got his start. And personally, I'm not a fan of Matt Drudge. So, really, I don't really want to read about Matt Drudge. Yeah. It is so well done. It's so smart. The dialogue's so smart. It's funny. It's heartbreaking. It's vivid. It's he manages to say a lot in just a few words, which is kind of, the goal with screenwriting. You want to be spare and concise and evocative at the same time. And it's just so great, and it's a biopic, which is what they want now, right? That's the one other way. And there's number 2 for you. Write a biopic. That's what the Blacklist likes. That's what that's one of the only movies the studios are willing to make that's not a franchise, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's...
So that and horror. The third one would be horror.
We're going to try that next.
Maybe a biopic that's horror.
A horror
biopic. My Life, Living with You. It's a horror pic and a biopic.
There we go. Write what you know.
Yeah, write what you know.
Exactly.
Right. So,
good. I'm glad you solved that.
Yeah, you solved it. We'll be we're going to move to LA next month, and we'll see you there. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So so your website is dianedrake.com, where people can find out all this, your book and everything. Your book.
Yeah.
Explain your book real quick. Your book is about.
My book is called Get Your Story Straight. It grew out of my teaching for UCLA, where I'm not this, but if you're like a really good tennis player, right?
Right.
And then you try to teach somebody who's never played tennis, or maybe they're just starting. It's like you have to really think about what you're doing because it's become kind of intuitive for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's
hard to explain something you already know how to do. Yeah.
That and that you've spent a long time and you've gotten to this point. So it really teaching for them, because I started teaching the beginners class. I'm teaching advanced class now, but I had to really kind of break down like the pieces and how you go about this. And that's why my book, the subtitle is like a step-by-step guide to screenwriting. So I put a lot of emphasis on structure because I think it's one of those things that's kind of invisible to maybe the layperson, but I think it's so critical. And I also believe, there are those people out there who are just, it's too formulaic, it's too, and I get that off of, Save the Cat and stuff. But it really, I don't make these rules. This is Aristotle, I think it's, again, kind of primal, that beginning, middle, end sense. Just like, even if you're not a musician, you can tell if like something's really off key or whatever, It's just, we sort of feel it if it's working. And so, and also, I just believe, if you educate yourself as to what are kind of the rules of not the rules, but the principles of the form, and then you want to break those, well, more power to you, right? But you'll be doing it consciously as opposed to just sort of randomly or arbitrarily or because you don't know any better.
So pin the tail on the donkey sort of effort instead of, Yeah,
exactly. So
Cool.
I use a lot of, films, I break them down in the book and stuff, and that's, what I like I said, it sort of grew out of my course. And then, as I think I mentioned, I want to try to put together more of a video series and really kind of create a slightly more interactive course online. So stay tuned for that. I'm working on that.
I say do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, do it. Because you have really effortless way of explaining things, and you have real experience, but you haven't pulled punches at all. It's not like you're like toting a party line or anything in any of the questions we ask you. You speak your mind. You speak your mind, yeah, which is great to hear. It's like it's refreshing to hear that instead of somebody that's just constantly trying to blow smoke up someone's ass.
I really do believe that. It's I remember when I first started writing, I remember thinking to myself, if I can only survive doing this, I really am, again, for better or worse, I'm not necessarily saying this is a good thing, but I'm more suited to it in the sense than I was to being an executive because, and this is broad strokes and no offense to anybody who's an executive, but I kind of felt like, being a really good executive is kind of about being a good liar in a way to some extent, and being a good writer is kind of about telling the truth. And I felt like I was a little better suited to trying to tell the truth, than to,
Awesome. That is a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much for talking to us. I'm glad we finally coordinated our schedules and able to meet because it was great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
And keep us posted. If there's anything else you want to talk about, just you got my Twitter name.
Well, yeah. If you get the web series up or whatever.
Yeah.
I will. I'll let you guys know because that'll give me extra incentive.
Yeah.
We could do a teaser to the web series or whatever, generate traffic over there.
Awesome.
All right then.
If you want to contact us, we are filmreverypodcast@gmail.com. Again, I'm Beckemeyer on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and Brad is
the Balding Ewok.
The Balding Ewok.
Well, not just
right. Balding Ewok. Right. I think after 77 episodes,
they should know.
They should know.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, go make something. We'll see you soon.
To be continued. Yes.
And cut. Film Reverie Podcast is a production of Super Mega Ultra Entertainment and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review in iTunes. And visit filmreverie.com to listen to past episodes and be sure to click like or subscribe wherever you find us. That's it for this time. We'll see you again next week with another episode of Film Reverie.